И сегодня у нас будет доклад Ильи Матвеева. И я передаю сейчас микрофон Екатерине Недёготь, которая скажет сначала два слова и представит Илью, а потом будем слушать доклад.
Когда мне Антон предложил обсудить как возможную тему нашей конференции в целом «Искусство и восстание», и спросил, не слишком ли это как-то выспренно звучит, то я сразу же пришла в полный восторг, сказала, что мне это очень нравится, в частности потому, что фонд Стелла находится рядом с бывшей площадью Восстания, об утрате названия которой я чрезвычайно переживаю. Но теперь мало того, что это площадь Восстания, теперь к нашему всеобщему удобству, как вы знаете, сегодня на нее переместилось также движение Occupy, как бы поближе к нам всем. То есть нам всем будет еще удобнее после окончания мероприятия зайти, поприветствовать своих друзей, товарищей. Вот, так что с этим я нас всех поздравляю. Мы продолжаем наше заседание. Сегодня у нас тоже будет по-английски доклад. Сегодня будет выступать Илья Матвеев, который аспирант философского факультета Московского государственного университета, также активист российского социалистического движения. И его доклад будет посвящен реальным и воображаемым эффектам медиа-активизма, что является очень актуальной темой для многих из нас.
Ну что, я начинаю?
Да.
So I would have to make a presentation in English, but the majority is Russian, of course, here, but still. The title of my presentation is Real and Imagined Effects of Media Activism. First, I would like to thank Stella Art Foundation for this opportunity to make this presentation. And I would like to note that I'm no expert in media studies or contemporary art. I was trained in philosophy and political science, but the basis for my presentation will be my political experiences and the reflections on them. So I would start by discussing the book by American author Todd Gitlin, which is called The Whole World is Watching, Mass Media in the Making and Unmaking of the New Left. Then I'll proceed to the Russian situation, and I will compare the situation in America in the 60s described by Todd Gitlin and our current situation. And then I will talk a bit about the whole framework of Gitlin's analysis and how it should be changed by if we want to take into account the new technological shift, the shift to the new media, which was basically not included in Gitlin's book, which was written in the 1980s. So recently I just encountered this book and it struck me that the situation which Gitlin described is very similar to Russian situation in a number of ways. What this book is about? It is about the student movement of the 60s, which was called generally the New Left. Todd Gitlin was a president of the Students for Democratic Society, an organization of militant New Left fighting against the war in Vietnam and for the whole set of other issues. So he was a president of SDS. He had first-hand experience, obviously, of the workings of the SDS. And then he became a media theorist, and he wrote a lot of books about media and how it influences social movements, how it influences just our life, how it functions. So what is behind the screen, which we see, what is behind the TV screen. So in this book, The Whole World is Watching, he discusses the interrelation between the media and the student movement. This phrase, "the whole world is watching," was coined by the American students. They were chanting this phrase at the campuses. It was meant to emphasize the importance of this local struggle. So they are fighting against the war in Vietnam, and the whole world is watching this fight. And it strangely connects with the phrase of an ordinary Egyptian who took part in the protest in Egypt, in Cairo, or in the square of Tahrir. He said that before I watched television, now television watches me. So this relation of media and protest is in this phrase. What Gitlin describes is first the basic principles and norms of media treatment of news. This is textbook material, and this book is studied in American universities, as I know, so it's kind of a classic analysis. But still, I noticed that these basic things are not generally known in Russia, especially in the activist circles, but still they are very important. So the news concerns the event, not the underlying condition, the event itself. It concerns the person, not the group. Conflict, not consensus. The fact that advances the story, not the one that explains it. So this is how media works and how news works. And if we want to understand how media and Russian media also talks about protests, talks about events organized by us, we should understand these basic principles. So event, person, conflict, and the things that advance the story, not explain it. So what else? I want to talk about several other parts of this book. Gitlin describes several careers of protest leaders of the 60s and the influence of media on these careers and on the movement in general. And the most striking example of the importance of media is Jerry Rubin. Jerry Rubin is basically, I think he's known in Russia. Some of his speeches were translated, I think. So he was very, very popular in America at that time. Because he was that kind of revolutionary with flare jeans and V-neck tees, so you can imagine. And he started his political career when he was involved in the free speech movement in 1964 in Berkeley. So Berkeley is this big university in America, a traditional center of the protest activity. It is still a very radical place. And at that time, there was a kind of a series of protests which were called free speech movements, because the students were protesting against restrictions on rallies and demonstrations on campus. So Rubin was involved in this free speech movement. Then he was involved in Vietnam Day Committee in 1965. And then, which was organizing the events against the war in Vietnam. And then it was the crucial part of his career. He was invited to the House Un-American Activities Committee in the American Parliament. There was a special commission for examining and investigating so-called un-American activities, meaning some subversive actions which are against patriotism and national interests and so forth. So Jerry Rubin was invited to speak, not invited but summoned to speak in front of this commission. And that was a real problem, because his own statement would be certainly distorted by the media, and he had to make some action, to make some move to bring his anti-war message and to bring his protest agenda, not even by his words, by his statements, but just by how he looked, because he knew that the media won't broadcast all of his words. So that was a problem. And discussing this problem with his friends, he decided that he will come and appear before this commission of un-American activities dressed as an American revolutionary of the 18th century, meaning like the founding father, right, of the America, this classic figure of the founding father. And this dress itself will emphasize this very real contradiction between the fact that Congress, the American Congress, the basis and the center of the liberties of America, is discussing what people say, what people do, what is so un-American in them. So that was the real contradiction. And he appeared before this commission dressed as an American revolutionary, trying to say that, look, what would the founding fathers say about that? So that was his basic message. It was extremely successful because all the TV channels and all the news papers, they all broadcasted this image, not even his words, but this image of this American revolutionary. And on campuses, this completely discredited this commission on un-American activities and made Rubin very popular. So he gained national reputation and became a national celebrity. That was crucial for his career, as I said, and that was a beginning of his end, somehow. So then Rubin understood how media worked. He understood that there was this big anti-war movement with a lot of activists, but for the media they needed a clear figure which will symbolize the movement, which will symbolize the movement, and which could be quoted and be like the symbol of this whole anti-war protests. He understood that they needed a person, and then he understood that not only they needed a person, but they needed a strange, extravagant, exalted personality, like very artistic and strange, interesting, so that it would be entertainment, right? It would be entertainment to watch this anti-war news. He perfectly understood that, and then he started to make this some actions specifically designed for the media to broadcast them. I also have to say this, that initially there was an idea of the judo tactic when you work with the media. Like judo, this kind of fighting, right? Which our President Putin is keen of doing, judo. So in judo, you have to use the weight of your opponent to thrash him. And working with the media, Rubin tried to make the weight of the media work for him. He tried to use the media for his own gain, for his own political advancement, and advancement of his cause, anti-war movement. But the other people involved in the movement, they were very concerned of what was happening, basically, because Rubin, he stole all the spotlight. He stole all the attention of the media and he turned it at himself. And he became unaccountable because to be this media figure, he didn't need his political base. He didn't need this network of activists in this Students for Democratic Society. So he created his own organization called Youth International Party, which was also it became symbolic in the 60s. No one knew what it was, this Youth International Party. The guys who were there were called yippies, and he just, it was basically his own kind of shadowy organization to present during the interviews, the media coverage, and so on. So he completely lost the connection with the rank and file activists. And the activists were very angry at him. Basically, they thought that his ego was enormous, that he wanted the personal fame. But Jitlin stresses that the story is not only about Jerry Rubin, right? It's about the structural weaknesses of the movement itself, of the movement of this anti-war movement against the war in Vietnam. So there is also this very important, I think, part of the Jitlin's analysis. He says that instead of a face-to-face political base, meaning his activists who know each other, who contact with each other, who connect and distribute news in this network of personal connections. Instead of this, he acquired a following, like a cult following. His following was organized precisely as a mass media audience, atomized, far-flung, episodic, and not alive politically except when mobilized on behalf of centralized symbols of revolt. So this is important because Rubin wanted to turn the American public on. He wanted to acquire to make the cause of anti-war protests very popular, and he wanted to awaken the national consciousness and so on. So what did he get, right, for his actions? He got this following, which was atomized. People didn't know each other. They were not connected with each other with specific channels of communication. They only watched TV and saw Rubin on TV and in newspapers. And this is how they were connected to this whole shadowy movement. So the people were far-flung, far from each other, and their interest in politics was episodic. It was not the real part of their lives. It was just for example, when you feel like watching an American TV series like Dr. House, right? You just watch Dr. House, then you leave it away and do something else. So their political thinking was organized like watching Dr. House. This is my interpretation of Jitlin's words. I think it's realistic. So then the next steps of the career of Jerry Rubin are the Chicago conspiracy trial, so-called Chicago conspiracy trial, because in 1968 in America there was a kind of a revolt during the meeting of the Democratic National Committee in Chicago, and a lot of people, there were very mass demonstrations, massive. And the government decided to persecute someone for these demonstrations, and then they selected this so-called Chicago 7, the most famous anti-war activists, and they started a conspiracy trial. So they were conspirators to organize.
When was it?
1968. 68, and the trial was 69-70. And what did the government basically do by that? First, they gave the stage for Rubin to express his ideas, and all the journalists to broadcast his ideas, because when you appear in front of the court, you can make a statement, and so he made a lot of statements, like every day he made some kind of statement, and this was a real stage for him. And he treated this trial not as a persecution, but as a perfect opportunity to do what he liked most, to be popular and to use media to his own gain. So, and the government treated his reputation as a hardcore revolutionary like it was true. And by that, Jitlin writes, the government certified this reputation. So everyone thought it was true because he was really tried for conspiracy, like a revolutionary. What is important also is that Jitlin writes about Rubin's own account of why he was doing all that, and he presents it as a kind of theory which drove Rubin to do what he did. This is what I call the imagined effects of media activism. The imagined effects were that he wanted to turn on the American public, to energize these kids, and to force them to act and to copy what he did, basically. So then his career was like he dropped his Youth International Party, organized a new organization, even stranger than the previous one. It was called Symbionese Liberation Army. It was with very strange slogans like "Death to the fascist insect" and so on. So it was kind of a terrorist outfit. They robbed banks, and it was more, like between a political protest, an organized gang, and a circus show. So that's how it worked. So Jitlin uses this story of Jerry Rubin to show how what does the movement do when it encounters media. What are the options for the movement? And he shows that one of the options is for the leaders of the movement to abandon the activists, rank and file activists, and to become these kind of celebrities and be personally popular, but this was not the political action of the movement itself. So he describes other careers, other possible careers of movement leaders when they got when the attention of the media turned to them. Other way was to completely to refuse to be a leader. And to say that several leaders of the anti-war protests, they refused to be leaders because they didn't want to be these celebrities, they didn't want this fame which discredited the cause, which was didn't envision the movement in its reality. So it was not the real movement which was broadcast on TV. It was the strange celebrity figures. And these leaders, they didn't want this fate, so they abandoned the movement altogether. What can we learn from this story which Jitlin told? We can see that media is a very material thing. It's a kind of a machine which works according to its own norms and principles, which which are themselves generated by political conflict within the institutions. So editors and journalists, they interact, they make editorial decisions, and this is how the news is produced. And the social movement, the popular social movement, inevitably comes into the spotlight. It gets the attention of the media, and then the media starts to transform the movement itself, because the leaders begin to get farther and farther, further and further from the activists, and activists in different cities start to learn about the movement's action on TV, basically, or in newspapers. They read about the movement in newspapers. It's not that their friends in different cities tell them, but they read in the newspapers what is happening. So media becomes part of the movement, basically. It becomes the communications channel of the movement. And this relation between the movement and the media is reciprocity. So they both influence each other. Okay, so what struck me the most in this story? It is that I saw that in Russia we have several stories which are very similar to what Jitlin described. For example, our well-known opposition leader called Sergei Udaltsov. So when discussing Sergei, I want to stress that I am completely sure of his conviction, and I totally believe that he is absolutely sincere in what he does. And right now, it's a tragic irony that we are participating in this food bank exhibition, and Sergei Udaltsov is on hunger strike, and he's being force-fed by the police. He's on hunger strike because he was sentenced to 2 weeks of prison for no reason at all, basically, and this is his way of protesting it. So I believe that Sergei is completely sincere in his actions. But as Jitlin, I want to stress that it is not about his personality, but about his strategy and the state of the social movement and political movements in Russia. So how it works with Sergei Udaltsov? He totally understood this idea that the media needs a person, a figure, which will symbolize the whole protest. So he understood it, and he started to use it to make his own political capital. His strategy is pretty simple. He he does some actions which are not sanctioned by the authorities. Then he gets into prison. The reporters take photos of him. They write about him. So you know the routine, because when you go to Lenta.ru, for example, the first thing you see when you read about some rally or some march or demonstration is that Sergei Udaltsov was sentenced to 3 days in prison for illegally participating in an illegal march. That's what we read. We don't read that there was a march which was against such and such decisions of the government. We read that Sergei Udaltsov was sentenced during this march. So this is not Sergei's problem. This is the media's problem. This is how media works. And the most striking example of that was when I helped organize. Recently, I helped organize a rally in Moscow against the commercialization of public education in Russia. So there was a rally against marketization of schools and universities and so on. So Russian socialist movement, of which I'm a member, took great pains to organize this event. And Sergei came to it. And he didn't even go to the stage. he didn't go to the public. He wasn't among the people who listened to those who spoke. He was just staying behind the fence, which was erected by the police, right? So he was staying outside the rally, basically, and giving interviews to some tens of television channels. He was talking about, not basically about the rally, but about this March of the Millions, which happened on 6th of May. And he was distributing leaflets, and he said, of course, I'm against Fursenko, but I'm also against Putin, so I'm against them both, and go to this march. So that was his clear and simple message. And then the next day, I saw on this Yandex news aggregator, I saw a lot of basically similar news stories with the same headlines. Sergei Udaltsov gathered 200 people to protest against the marketization of education. So Sergei Udaltsov did it. And then I understood that it is a knee-jerk reaction, basically. The journalists, they don't need to investigate or to examine or to seriously explore who actually organized this event. They just need one figure, which is very famous and very well known, and they'll say that Sergei Udaltsov organized it. So it was still very strange to me, because it was Interfax, the news agency, which designed this story, and then everyone reprinted it, everyone. So everyone said that Sergei Udaltsov organized the rally. This happened because maybe this movement against the worsening of education in Russia. There's a real movement. There are several groups in universities, in several political groups. This whole movement is not accustomed to working with the media, is not accustomed to using the media in its own gain. And Sergei Udaltsov is very accustomed to that. That's why it happened this way. So what is also interesting about Sergei is that he also has his own organization called Left Front, as you all well know. But he is practically autonomous from this organization. He works by himself, like Jerry Rubin, right? He's kind of a media celebrity, freelance leader, which is not a true leader of Left Front, of his own activists. So, but again, I want to stress that this is not a personal critique of Sergei, because that would be absurd. It is basically that I think that our movement is in a very sorry state. We don't have enough activists, enough people who believe us, enough people who are interested in this. And that's why in this desert, which is politics in Russia, the people turn to the media to use it to simulate politics, basically. So that is not problem of Udaltsov or Navalny or Nemtsov. It is the problem of the politics in Russia. So it is very natural to turn to media to advance your political goals. But it doesn't work, basically. I don't think that it works. I don't think that without a strong, organized political base, without people who are really involved in doing something, you can advance your cause. I think that this media activism is politically ineffective in the long run. So, and I think that Jitlin at least partially agrees with me on that. So, what I wanted to say next is that the case of Udaltsov is a good example of what Jitlin laid out. But also, I think the case of this art collective Vaina is also a good example. You all, I think, well know this group Vaina. What they did was inflating their protest actions to the extreme. They needed to make the next action more violent, more risky, and more dangerous for themselves than the previous one. And they wanted to be noticeable. They wanted to transmit their image, the image of protest, the image of the possibility of protest, and the image of people who are not cowards and are ready to take action. They wanted to transmit this image as broadly as possible. And their actions, which led to very serious consequences for them. They were imprisoned for several months, some of the members of Vaina. They were really, well, they partially achieved their goal, that the image of, for example, the police officers' heads laying on the ground were all over the internet when Oleg Vorotnikov from Vaina, he just went to the demonstration and he threw the heads of the police officers in a like acting to discredit them, to make them look silly. And this image was very popular. So in some time ago, the last year, members of Vaina crew gave an interview to Afisha magazine to Oleg Kashin, a very well-known Russian journalist. And in this interview, they said that their theory of what they were doing, if you may call it a theory, was very similar to what Jerry Rubin said. They said that they wanted to turn the people on, to make them angry and to make them want to go and to make them angry at themselves, that they're cowards, that they're lazy, that they are afraid of protesting, and they wanted them to go on the streets and to take action, like they did. So this is kind of what Jerry Rubin said, I think. And what is also very important, that Jitlin stresses that these media personalities, they make a kind of prefabricated identity for themselves. They are not acting like real persons. They are acting like a specific, like actors who have their moves, who are known for specific things. So they're always trying to act out when they give interviews to the media and so on. Vaina, members of Vaina have this prefabricated identity. They have this role which they are playing. For example, when Oleg Kashin took this interview, they presented themselves as a kind of worn-out criminals who know the language of the criminal world, who know what the criminals do, and so they're like artist criminals or criminal artists who employ the language of the contemporary art and the language which they supposedly learned in prison. It was all an act. It was an act to make a splash in the media, I think. And this is, well, what struck me was that this act had historical precedence in America, actually, and so this is not unprecedented. So, what I want to say next is that I think there's a general pattern in this kind of extreme political art. When an artist tries to make a violent, shock-like intrusion in the consciousness of people who see his actions, he wants to awaken their consciousness, he wants to, this is his theory of what he's doing, he wants to turn them on, to make them angry, to show them, to reveal them something. He wants to reveal them the real oppression which is happening, and he wants to energize them and make them do something. So this is a general pattern of this violent political art, like Vaina collective, for example. I think there is a fundamental problem of this whole pattern. Maybe it is connected to the figure of spectator, which is described by a French philosopher Jacques Rancière. Because Rancière notes that spectator is fundamentally passive. And what is the problem of this violent demonstrations of something which political actionists do? It is that the spectators, the people who watch them, are fundamentally passive. They are left with in the state of watching with awe, with shock, what Vaina has done. I think that this kind of action doesn't really provoke action in return. It doesn't allow participation, and fundamentally these activists they are left alone because of this lack of participation which they are offering. And all this, of course, is connected to the media itself, because earlier the media, the key characteristic of the media was that it was a one-way channel. You can watch TV, but you can't influence what is happening on TV. That's why TV is so perfectly suited for this kind of violent actionism, because you can record it and you can show it, and people will watch it and something will happen to them. Their subjectivities will change, presumably. So I think that this is a thing of the past, at least because the media itself is changing. Because this one-way communication of the traditional media is becoming history itself. With the introduction of the new media in all its different forms, people who are using the media, they are not only observers, passive observers of what is happening. They can make specific actions if only in this media framework. These actions could be very small and meaningless, like pushing the like button, or they can be more meaningful, like when you write a text and then you distribute it, you comment it, you actively take part in the media itself. So this distinction between the organized political base and the media following, of which I talked earlier, I think the boundary between these two groups is becoming blurred and maybe even non-existent, because this kind of new protest communities which are emerging today, they are part organized base and part media following. They include people by including them in this two-way communication using Facebook, Twitter, and so on. They include people and they allow them to make some moves and to take part in the action, but still it is media and it can reach people from different cities. It can extend and it is broadcasted very widely. So I think that the participation is a key thing in today's protests, and this is why this kind of political art and political actionism of art of Vaina and the groups like that are a thing of the past. This is my opinion. So I want to end my presentation with describing some recent events. This is of course a risky move because it happens like behind our eyes, but still I want to talk about it because these are my impressions. As you know, and maybe some of you took part in it, on Чистые пруды there was a general assembly, like in Occupy Wall Street and Tahrir and Madrid and Barcelona squares in Spain. So there was a general assembly, and today yesterday there was an extraordinary assembly to decide where to go when the camp is evicted. And a Russian radio channel called Dozhd, Rain, made a comment on that decision by the assembly. The person said that it should be noted that the decision, presumably to move the camp, the decision was made not by Yashin, not by Udaltsov and Navalny, meaning legitimate leaders, but some never heard of self-proclaimed, you know what, assembly. So, you know, what assembly, what assembly? So I like this complete blindness to the real source of legitimacy of political action. The media, in its mechanical way, treats the decisions of media figures like a source of legitimacy. But in reality, the gathering of people, the assembly, is the source of legitimacy. And for the media, this is completely blind. This is, they can't even see it because of the principles of their workings. So we have to deal with it, I think. And we have to take into account in our political art and in our activism how media is structured, and not completely shun away from the media and not become its kind of slave. We have to take the middle road and to use media consciously in our own game. So, thanks.
So, I have lots of questions already. I hope you do too. I have lots of questions already. I hope you do too. So I'll start with a couple of them. So the first, let's put it bluntly. What do you mean? So do you mean that we have to grow still some leaders instead the Russian socialist movement inside it instead of Udaltsov? Mm-hmm. Or you mean that we still have to follow the rhetoric which is being developed very strongly and rightly so of an egalitarian structure, and this is this is stronger? So many people whom I interviewed yesterday on Чистые пруды were telling me the same, that this is the strongest part of the movement, that it has no leaders. So should we still find a leader for the media or not? What's your position?
So my position is basically that we shouldn't find a leader for the media. And Russian socialist movement, there are two facts about it. First, it was the most active organization in making possible the assemblies themselves. They were organized by our activists, and this is our principal position. This is our principle, that the democracy, this kind of democracy, is more important than leadership. So this is us who forced this into happening. And the second fact is that we don't have leaders ourselves. So Russian socialist movement itself is not a hierarchical organization. We have some kind of political, a group of people who take political decisions, but still no leaders. So
there are some candidates. Hmm? There are some possible figures. Well,
there are people who are more known than others, but they are not leaders, and we don't have this strict hierarchical principle of leadership. So maybe you're talking about Ilya Budraitskis, but Ilya Budraitskis is not a member of the Central Committee of Russian Socialist Movement, so he's just a public intellectual. A public intellectual is another problem, and we may have to discuss it separately, but we don't have to find new leaders, I think. We have to force the media to report what the assembly has decided. This is our principal goal today.
And another question I will ask before I turn to your questions. I have actually some problems with your notion of media activism.
Mm-hmm.
are you considering Sergei Udaltsov a media activist? So I'll tell you how I see it. So my position would be that media activist in a sensu stricti, which I tend to follow, is an activism in a form of a media project, which would be kind of a guerrilla newspaper, pirate television program. So this would be the strictest thing. Then there are other things like documentation of performances and political actions. So here we're on a territory which is shaky, because let's take the case of Pussy Riot. Pussy Riot and they action and performance in the Savor Cathedral. So first they were, as you know, persecuted for the action itself. Then suddenly, at least the Russian Orthodox Church, I didn't follow about the court and the authorities, but the Russian Orthodox Church actually insisted that the crime is not the action itself, but the film which was put on YouTube and widely distributed, and they insisted the criminals are those who did this film, and also those who were like holding this music stuff and helping them to bring it. Since I know people who did the films, I became very worried about that. But it seems that in this case, if we are considering this media activism, that it means the Russian Orthodox Church kind of understood our way of thinking and realized that this is artwork, read crime too. But there is the third case, which is Sergei Udaltsov, which I wouldn't consider neither nor. So he is, maybe I'm wrong, in my understanding he's a politician who's simply using this opportunity to appear on TV, and I would not call him media activist.
Yes, of course Sergei is not an artist. Right? He's not an artist, he's a politician. And I don't claim that what he does is some kind of art or media activism. What is important is that with his actions, he uses the media machine in a very specific way, just like Vaina and I think Pussy Riot also. So there is a connection in how they instrumentalize the media. This is the connection precisely. And so that's my first reply.
So you're considering him going on strike, a political activism, where he's using the possibilities of media, yeah, like that?
He's going on strike. On hunger strike right now? I don't think so. I think it's a kind of a personal vengeance upon the people who captured him, and a kind of his personal statement. This is not to get fame, because almost no one reported on that, and almost no one writes about his hunger strike right now. This is his personal thing, and I know that when I was at Чистые пруды, his lawyer came to there and said that everyone tells Udaltsov to stop hunger strike, but he doesn't, because this is his principal position. So hunger strike is not. But for example, when there was this Day of Anger, this kind of form of protest in the early years in Moscow, there was a sanctioned Day of Anger, sanctioned protest, everyone was standing there, but Udaltsov decided to go and try to break the оцепление. Tried to break it, and he was immediately arrested and was sentenced to like 2-3 days in jail. So I think that was kind of a specific media-driven act. It was specifically for the media to get his picture, and for Lenta.ru and all other media outfits to write about this Day of Anger, because without that, without his sentencing, they will never write about it. It's just some kind of ordinary rally. What's so interesting about it? And if Udaltsov was sentenced, this is like a trigger for them to write. So that was done specifically for the media.
Actually, yesterday, when I went from Чистые пруды home with a taxi, in a taxi there was a radio on, the Echo Moskvy, and they were quoting Mother by Gorky. Mать, Roman Mать, where I have completely forgotten the plot of this novel, of course, but they were reminding us that the very moment when Pavel Vlasov felt that things are changing, when he started to publish a newspaper, actually, and the people were giving money for this newspaper, and they really had the feeling that something is changing with what they actually spent. So the media was at the center of everything at that moment already.
Hello? Okay, so I have a comment and a question. Well, maybe two questions maybe. The first has to do with the example you pick from the United States, from Jitlin's writings about Rubin and the Symbionese Liberation Army and his actions. And you compared it with this guy on hunger strike here. But I guess that idea of this single person working with the media, which for you is very, I guess, generally negative or not useful for the way you guys are planning movement here, is very interesting to me that you picked that one, as opposed to, say, another example from maybe even 10 and 15 years before in the United States of the civil rights movement, in which there weren't just leaders who were very well represented on television and speaking a lot, but these leaders were actually, were very well trained in speaking with media and practiced a lot and prepared for that, but at the same time were very closely tied to really strong grassroots networks of people who themselves were trained. So you had youth from universities, you had mothers, workers, you had people who prepared for demonstrations by dressing really well, being very aware of the media, anyone that you could stop and make and catch to give a comment was very well trained and able to speak. So there was a sense of, for that movement, even as early as the 1950s, that it would be very important to work with various forms of media across the entire base. So there wasn't this separation between what you're calling media activism and activism, which leads me to my second question, which is about the distinction you made between acting out and activism, which is not so clear to me. So you talked about these prefabricated identities that people are making, the provocative actions to awaken consciousness and so on, and you oppose that. I think you kind of oppose that to something that maybe, I'm putting words in your mouth, seems more authentic, but you didn't define that yet. So can you define for me, when you make this distinction between acting out, I understand what you mean by acting out, but I don't understand what you mean by actual activism.
Okay, so the answer to your first question is that imagine Martin Luther King without a political base, without people who support him. I think Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and other leaders of the civil rights movement were not media figures in this sense. They were leaders of organized movement, of strong organizations. As far as I know, civil rights movement was organized with cells and different universities, so there was a structure in it. So it was a structured movement which could allow itself for its leaders to work with the media. So of course the media would turn their attention to them, but the idea was that movement was first and media was second. That's, I think, how it was organized. So the movement, its own organization and discipline was more important to them. And the advances made by the civil rights movement were because of this strong organization, because of lots of supporters and disciplined political activists who organized them. So this is as far as I read about it in books. And the answer to your second question is quite simple. Difference between activism and acting out is that when you act out, you need a stage, and you do it specifically for people to see you. So when it is your goal to act out, to use the media and not to achieve some concrete goal, maybe, then it is acting out. So if Sergei Udaltsov really planned to go through the police and to lead a large crowd of people on this non-sanctioned rally, that would be activism. But that was not acting out, but just part of his personal strategy. So I think that this distinction is clear. Okay. So also about this difference between art and activism, which Ekaterina talked. I think that there is a very illuminating thing about Vaina, that the obvious roots, the artistic roots is like Viennese actionism and this whole tradition, but there were very concrete images and people who done them before Vaina. For example, there was this National Bolshevik Party in Russia, which in the early what's 90s? No, 2000s. Yes, early 2000s. So they made this symbolic action. They took over the Ministry of Health. And they threw a portrait of Putin out of the window. You can say that it wasn't art, right? But it was very symbolic. This image of portrait being thrown out of the window was a symbol which was broadcasted by the media, and then it was practically copied by Vaina when it threw the heads of the police officers. It was the same thing, to degrade the authority, to show that authority is silly and you can beat it. So there are artistic roots to Vaina, and there are strictly political roots to Vaina. Yeah.
I want to follow up about this distinction, because I think you still told me more about acting out than activism. And I guess I'm really focused on the acting part, because in your description, you talk about this performativity of the acting out people in a way, I think, that is fairly negative, that it's about performing in a particular way for the media and to provoke and to get some kind of action. And you distinguish that from acting out, but from activism. But it seems to me that for the kind of political changes that need to happen, and the kind of political changes, for example, that needed to happen in the United States in the 1960s and 50s, it was very important, the performativity of the people. When the people marched, when they dressed, when they appeared in public, at the very most basic grassroots level, they were in a performance. They had to maintain a particular performance, especially to avoid being constantly provoked by people who wanted to provoke them, to continue chanting, to sing. A huge part of the movement, there are compilations and recordings of the songs that people sang together in harmony. Musicians were involved. There was a huge element of acting, performativity, expression, expressiveness, and what we would call art to that movement at a very basic grassroots level that very much contributed to its success. I don't think anyone would argue against that. So I'm a little bit worried when you, in your talk, put performativity. Whenever you talk about performativity, it's on the side of acting out, which is not good. And activism is something else more serious and more focused. So where's the acting? So my next question, I guess, is forget acting out for a second. Where's the acting, the performativity in activism?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a difficult question, and I agree with what you said. It would be crazy and stupid to throw out the cultures which were produced by protest movements all over the world, right? And the civil rights movement and the left with its own distinct culture, with its folk musicians and so on. We shouldn't throw it away. But I think the distinction lies in the fact that Jerry Rubin, for example, when he dressed for the reporters specifically, his idea was to not to take not to take lead in this, not to produce some kind of authentic culture, but to use the stereotypes, already existing stereotypes, for the media to accept him. So when he dressed as a revolutionary, it was actually a kind of a real acting. So it was very real. But Jitlin describes later that Rubin repeated his performance, but with a new dress. He was dressed in sandals, with a uniform, sandals, Vietnamese traditional clothes. He had a toy gun, and this was all very confused. And I think that it was just a kind of a stereotyped amalgamation of what the media was reporting. So it was not an authentic culture produced by the movement. It was a kind of an image produced specifically for the media. So I think you can still draw this distinction.
Okay, but I'm asking you about now. I didn't want to talk anymore about Rubin and these guys. I'm asking you about now, here, the movement that you're making. Where is the performance there? Where is that for you in terms of what are the cultures that you're making? If you want the media to notice, what are you making?
I think that my personal motivation is that today in Russia, you can say that there really is a kind of movement, you know? Maybe there is the liberal democratic movement, but to say which presented itself during these big marches and this Occupy and all that. But you can't say that there is a very broad social leftist movement of which we can talk. And without that, our own performances of kind of producers of leftist culture always look a bit, in a vacuum, and it gives some kind of falsity to them. That is my personal opinion. I think that today, I'm speaking from the left, right? Our primary task is to build a strong and broad organization, and not to act out and to make some appealing culture. No, it was basically a question of organizing, and not of this cultural expression. This is what I think. So maybe I'm not, there are different opinions, and maybe I'm not right, but this is my impression, that without a real movement, when you have a 1st of May demonstration of independent unions, leftists, and all that, and it's just 1,000 people, right? With all the left in Moscow, 1,000 people. What kind of culture can we really produce? I think it's not a question of culture now, it's a question of organization and maybe a party.
Okay. So just to summarize, and then I'm going to be done. I just want to understand you, because this is what I was suspecting, and now it's clear. You think that to build a successful movement that builds to a broad base, that includes people voluntarily, not just because someone is making an act on television, but really inspires people to join, you think that these things that you're referring to as culture, which have to do with performativity and expression and freedom, are secondary to something that you think of as organization?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
I think that what Ilya meant in reference to the Vaina group was also the fact that the drawback of their Protestant appearances in media is also the fact that they reduce their protest to facing their personified power, which are just several people against which they show their mutiny. So they don't talk about social injustice, they don't manifest the social problems, they don't speak for those layers of society who are living in problems, etc. So actually, they do, apart from the fact that they don't belong to movement, they strive first and foremost for some kind of anarchic personal freedom, which is very much reminiscent to Dadaist gesture. And the question is whether today this Dadaist gesture is relevant as politically effective.
what is your opinion, Katie? So you asked the question, but what is your answer? But you asked the question if it's effective, but what do you think?
Well, it's effective to arise anger in the echelons of power and to show them that there is the dissatisfaction in public. But from the point of view of political efficiency, of course, they are not effective. They are not efficient. I think it's some kind of first stage of showing dissatisfaction, and I would say that maybe this kind of activism is the birth and revival of the liberal intelligentsia. But it doesn't belong to the left movement in ideas, in beliefs, in convictions. It's quite far from the, I don't know, any kind of socialist movement, any kind of serious work with social problems.
Yeah, but Pussy Riots are effective. Even if they are not effective, if we are strictly speaking about the left-wing agenda, of course they are not following it. But are we excluding any other possibilities to be socially effective in a so-called progressive field, or are we only focused on those who would correspond to our criteria of left-wing? Because they are much more effective than all of our aspirations.
I agree that they are effective in terms of rising discussion and making a scandal. But we have to wait. We have to wait to see the real efficiency. Because what was the effect? The effect was a huge, almost 100,000 prayer, which is disgusting, at the Savior Cathedral. Of course, there were effects, as you mentioned, I completely agree with you, the split within the church itself, the split within intelligentsia itself, and this is fantastic that it happened. But on the other hand, the clericalic movement is also being, well, it's also working, and it's also working on becoming stronger and stronger. So we have to wait, I think, to find the real effect out of it.
No, I actually do not think it's becoming stronger. It's showing, it's trying to show its strengths, but it's obvious that Pussy Riot actually achieved by. It happened, yeah, so maybe it's wrong to say that they achieved it, yeah, but it happened somehow, that they created a discussion in a place where we couldn't even hope to. We were not even aiming at this field. We were completely forgetting this part of society, and they actually managed to create a schism inside so-called Orthodox believers, and to show that there is also social discrepancy and class discrepancy inside Orthodox Church. They actually did something left never did. And so we have to think how it happened and why, and we have to learn from that. I think it's a very important
The intervention was much more effective than the Vaina interventions. They had a fantastic intervention into the church. So this never happened before. I think
I completely agree that Pussy Riot's action was very effective. I think that in general it changed the balance of power very much. And I think that it forced the church to show what it really is today in Russia. And the resulting image is so ugly that everyone is so disgusted by it that the parts of the church are, as Ekaterina said, already beginning to revolt against this church authority, because it's corrupt and power-driven nature is so obvious that no one wants to have anything in common with it. But I think that the really difficult question is, did they really aim at that? Did Pussy Riot really envision these consequences? Or I think it was kind of... I think it was kind of blindly.
I saw their
struggling.
site. I saw their site, and when they were giving explication of their act, they talked a lot about co-option of power and the church. I think this criticality of this terrible co-option of power and the church was part and parcel of their action from the very beginning.
At least we should say that what really started this whole wave was not their action in itself, but the reaction of church to it. I think what really started the public debate was that we were persecuted out of proportion for what they did. So maybe this was like a joint performance by the church, the police, and Pussy Riot to force us all to see what the church is really like. Because I don't know, I don't think that this event itself started the discussion. They just touched some very painful nerve for the church, and then it all started. So that's what I think.
No, I actually think that it's a sexist thing to deny Pussy Riot the whole, intentional dimension, and it's very typical, unfortunately, that dismissing them because they are part of those, so to speak. They are part of those. They might even believe in God, They might be. I only know one of them, but I don't know about the others. They might even be Orthodox believers. So what does it mean? They are, of course, not left-wing. They are, of course, not like progressive, decent people. So they are part of those mass we actually would like to modernize, but we are afraid of. So I think that one thing we have to learn from Pussy Riot, how not to alienate this mass. So unfortunately, the left wing is very much by insisting that they are so democratic and part of the masses, they are alienating it in many circumstances. I can see it, and this is like by miracle we see how it can be when it is not happening, when they are not alienating and turning, maybe because they are women, but it also means something. The way all the things took place.
I definitely agree with the last comment, and I wanted to add something to this notion of alienation. I think if, as you say, there are only 1,000 people or so on involved in your movement at the level you would like them to be in all of Moscow, then it seems to me you can't afford to alienate anyone, not even the Vaina performances that you don't like. It seems to me that there has to be a kind of attitude of trying to find out what about these actions we can learn from, we can work with, and that we can use no matter what, in a way. And in addition, it seems that it seems absolutely impossible to me to reach a broader base and to expand this base without connecting to the very basic kind of things that people like and that people connect with, and a lot of that I think has to do with not being so attached to intentionality and being somewhat open to experimentation. I think, one of your critiques of all the different groups that you critiqued today had to do with the fact that you weren't sure what their intentions were, how clear they are about their intentions, and that we need clearer organization, more focused intentions, and clearer statements. And I don't know if that's necessarily, or that intentionality has been necessary in the building, or at least in my study of different movements, at all the time. Especially at the beginning. There has to be a sort of feeling of experimentation, of reaching out for something, of extension and trying things that you don't normally try without necessarily knowing the outcome in order to hit upon something. That has to do more with risk to me than intentionality. So if I had to pick one, I would say to get going, sometimes it's more important risk, to ask yourself what you're willing to risk, what you're willing to change about your actions, rather than absolutely having to know what exactly you have to do to go to a particular destination and goal.
Well, it is really difficult for me to agree with you here because as a leftist with our usual emphasis on theory, we just can't, you know, do something and without intention, without envisioning to what it might lead. So it is all theory to us.
Something based on intuition?
I know intuition is not a concept of any leftist philosopher. It's a concept of Henri Bergson, who was a rightist. So I just can't use it, you know. It's
You're
impossible.
not
Yeah, no, I just can't. It's impossible.
Intuition is a concept. I understand what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
it's just that what is also important is that we can, of course, we can act on intuition and to reach out to someone, but would we really want that? We want very concrete things, you know? Maybe the problem is not the irrational, intuitive, the lack of this irrational plane in our ways of doing. Maybe it's just we need more time, we need to be more dedicated, we need to be more precise in our words and all that. So I think that the way of Pussy Riot, when they tried their song in one place, they tried their song in another place, and suddenly they hit the spot. That's not how we do it, basically. I just can't envision, you know, Russian socialist movements doing our march in this way, in that way, and then suddenly, wow, everyone is writing about us. So it's not how we do it, basically. I think that, but still, what really troubles me is that the story of Pussy Riot shows that you might be right, you know, because they really, maybe they didn't intend that, but this action was very effective and it did bring very progressive consequences. So now the left has a very wide field of critique of the church and of all these reactionary tendencies, and now everyone listens to us because they see that the head of our church is like a thief and a person who throws people in jail. So they opened up the possibility for us to really effectively work in this anti-clerical stance and advance our agenda. So I don't know. Maybe we really should use more intuition.
Okay,
but
forget intuition. How about just not being boring?
no,
Intuition is
no.
stupid. I don't forget it.
Do you know what Trotskyism means? Trotskyism means it's like very strict, very strict.
Sorry, I don't know your name. Adela, very nice. I wanted to mention that actually the contemporary post-operaist left theory was part of post-structuralist left theory, which was based on the theory of the unconscious, of the machinic unconscious, developed by Deleuze and Guattari. So this element of organization which the contemporary post-operaist, post-workist leftists have right now are based on the social strata and social infrastructure, which is also unconscious. But unconsciousness is not a Freudian unconscious, which is personal and intimate, but this is the social unconscious. So I would like to say that unconscious is part and parcel of the leftist movement as well. And it cannot do without intuition, as well as intention.
I was curious in all this discussion, since we are anyway talking about activism, but also about art, to see, to try to understand which are the changes that this kind of act and of manifestation are doing, not on the society, but on the field of contemporary art. Because I was kind of impressed that in the last 2 weeks, apart of receiving this newsletter from e-flux, where Pussy Riot were actually in the cover, also Massimiliano Gioni and Maurizio Cattelan made an exhibition in their gallery in New York, where the main and I would say the most visible piece of art was this drawing by Alexandra Galkina of the Pussy Riot. And so actually researching the contemporary art and this link with abroad in Russia, and for me it's impressive the speediness of these images, of how and how they become how they are digested by the system of art much faster than many other kind of arts. And so I would love to ask all of you if you have any thoughts about how I mean also the system of the art will how all these manifestations, because they are not the only artists involved in the manifestation. There are many others that are, as you know, more leftist and that are opening school, these pedagogical poems. So which are different things that maybe will change for this?
Sorry, I didn't understand what exactly is your question.
No, my question is, because we were speaking about how this act can change society and raise discourse in society. And my question is, what the opposite, what this act could change in the art system, or I would say, to be more specific, in the contemporary art scene of Russia. Because of this very visible Pussy Riot by now.
Actually, Pussy Riot, I'm sorry, don't give a shit about art system. Yeah, so they did the project not for that. It's not aimed at art system at all. And I think it's very good. And this is because what is interesting for me about art system, that how it functions, the art system now functions as, I wouldn't even call it solidarity, although it's a part of it, by the mechanism of inclusion. Like the first avant-garde actually functioned by exclusion, gradually excluding also the community of avant-garde artists were excluding different phenomena. It was political as well as aesthetical principle. Now what happened? Actually, Pussy Riot didn't call themselves artists. So they did several performances which could have been considered something in between punk band, music band, and political action, and had nothing to do with art scene, very, very remotely.
Unlike by now, which claims...
Yeah, very remotely so. It was actually had nothing to do with that. But then art community itself and also the audience started to call them art. They never said we are artists or things like that. So we are now operating by the mechanism of inclusion. We are including, it already happened in Kiev, as Nikita can confirm, with Alexander Volodarsky, who also did a performance, a political performance, and then he was explained that he is an artist and that he can join the community, and he was invited somehow to join the community after that. And it's same thing, and we still do not know, we didn't talk to them, we do not know what the three girls think about them being included in art community, but we already included them. Their reaction, the social, what happened after the performance, it tells us this is art, I would say. So this is how it functions now.
But same time, regarding Volodarsky, he made his action like naked performance in front of Ukrainian parliament, imitating sex, like as imitator of Vaina. He was a big fan of Vaina actions. He wanted to do something like that. So maybe the intention to give people example, it was successful maybe only in a case of Volodarsky. Maybe there are other cases like inspired by Vaina, but I don't know them. Here was like a successful case of deeply inspired person who made his action and went to prison for that.
I want to discuss in more detail this case of Alexander Volodarsky, because I think it fits in the framework of which I described earlier. So what did he do, basically? There was a special committee in the parliament, in the Ukrainian parliament, like ethics committee or something, which always devised some new laws to make the morale of Ukrainian citizens more strict. So it was kind of hypocritical ethical thing. And Volodarsky and some women, they imitated sex, being naked in front of the parliament to I don't know what. So I don't know exactly what was their goal. So they they were persecuted for it. And this is a very clear example. Well, did they awaken the national consciousness to the fact that ethical committee in the parliament is hypocrisy and stupidity? I don't know. Did they publicize this cause? Did they make it more? Did they advance it in Ukrainian society? What did they achieve with it? Was it really progressive? So I think that these artists, they're always trying to reveal something to the public, to reveal that ethical committee is bad, but everyone knows that, you know? And they're always trying to show everyone that, look, this is the real contradiction. So we are performing and we are violating the laws which they adopted, and this is how we fight like artists or not artists. So I think this is the real problem with performances like that.
Maybe they try to somehow ritualize the protest against this moral commission, giving a victim, like turning in a victim, making some ritual or some drop of blood on this altar of protest. So they perceived it in a bit like mystical way. And somehow these performances, this turning protest into performative action, it is dangerous even without these leaders or these representative figures. The big group of people, like the collective of protesters, can be turned into spectacle as well, especially when leftist groups build all their visuality on quotes, like even not on tradition, which goes, for example, from 20s or 30s or 10s, but they just quote certain things, and they recognized by mass media as like those leftists, those who have this identity which is marked by certain symbols, and they fall into this problem even without leader. And once artist Yuri Lederman, he told that art exhibitions should be boring as scientific conferences. And I think it would maybe be really good if the protest will turn boring as scientific conferences, when people will not shout, they be loud.
Can't get any more boring than it already. It's not. It already is. It already is. I went to the protest here in Bolotnaya Square, and in Sahara. It was there are no puppets. It was really boring.
It's a big progress.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid that Ilya and Nikita are not fair to Alexander Volodarsky and the actions that he did and to the actions of this kind, because it's not like a matter of what you achieve by making some radical act immediately in the public. Like it's not like, oh my God, they got naked and imitated sex, we're gonna cancel the National Commission for Morality. It's not like that. It's a matter of antagonism that you create by doing something like this, which is also the case with Pussy Riot, of course. So the real product of this kind of action, of radical action of artistic kind, is not some material or ideological immediate result. It's an antagonism and looking at what happens in the society after you do something like that. And I can say that Ukrainian society was extremely polarized by the action that he did. Of course, it's incomparable to the polarization that we have now in Russia because of Pussy Riot. But the constellation of defenders and fighters of the so-called social morality that this commission was about to support, it changed completely. And I think it led to really interesting results and progressive results in the society. And one more thing is that the National Commission for the support of social morality was at last cancelled. Of course, not as a result of what Volodarsky did, but it happened already twice. It was cancelled, then it was renewed, now it's cancelled again. So, we don't have to look at these actions as a linear thing, as something that leads to immediate results. It's not like that.
Also needed to say that Volodarsky also gave this drop of blood to leftist intellectuals to turn this blood and flesh into discourse. So in this sense, it was also a positive effect. And to say more serious, he really provoked discussion, but not in quite closed community, but it was important.
Okay, I still have these difficulties with this thing about provoking conversation by doing something like that. Why can't you provoke conversation by writing an article, for example?
Yeah,
I just would
I think it's very much about provocation, but not just about conversations. So I think this performance by Volodarsky was a pure provocation of the police, what sometimes artists do, and the fact that they were naked had to expose, of course, the violence of the police to them in a very obvious way, and that's why many of the performances artists actually did in the history. They were naked to emphasize this notion of a naked individual in front of the police force or the state force. I actually think that there are different ways to do a work of art. To just bring attention to an issue, it's already very important. And to do it in such a provocative way is also important. I think, Ilya, you are very wrong when you say that everybody knows that Commission of Morale is bad. You're completely wrong. And in Ukrainian society is not a thing which is not even being acknowledged by everyone, and not let alone agreeing with it. I think the artists do have their role, which might be to fulfill this role might be much more important than to strictly following the agenda of being leftist. You know, the artists are not subscribing to being necessarily left-wing. Yeah, that they have, they can do other things in the same progressive agenda.
Yes, but if we're talking about art, this is the whole area of art which we didn't even mention in today's conversation. This is the art which includes participation of the viewers. I think that if you want to talk about progressive art, this is the more right way, because yes, artists can play this role of provoking somehow conversation and showing something, revealing something about this, for example, Commission of Morality. But still, I think people who will hate Volodarsky will hate him, and people who will love him will love him. This doesn't change anything in people. His act doesn't change anything, because he can't change people with his action. They have their own presuppositions for that.
Pussy Riot did. I don't know about Volodarsky.
No, Pussy Riot did. No, they didn't. I think the church did it. When they threw them in prison, they did it, because that was very material act. The Pussy Riot was just singing in the church. I don't think that people who approve of singing in the church, of course they will love them. The people who don't approve of singing in the church, they still hate them, but they want them to be released from jail, because it's like crazy. You know, they didn't change anyone's opinion on the reason on singing in the church. They just they provoked the extreme repression of the state, and that was the real trigger of the public discussion. So if the state will leave them alone, no one will discuss it.
It's a very non-leftist way of thinking, what you're saying, yeah? Because you're denying the mass or the representative of the people, the intentions, you're giving all the power to the state. I think it's strange, yeah, for a Marxist thinker.
Well, my original idea was that by trying to reveal something to the people, we already like deprive them of their power of thinking, that we always want to reveal them that Commission for Morality is bad, and people know that already. So that is, I think, the leftist way of thinking. And the thing that the state provoked the people's anger is not that people are important and state is potent, is that this very concrete action provoked their reaction. So I think that this is not the case that if Pussy Riot themselves provoked it, that would be people's massive participation or something. So maybe I'm too conservative in this field, I don't know.
Yeah, I would just like to briefly comment this argument that why don't you write a text to start a discussion. I would say that, for instance, Volodarsky, if we stick to his example, is a very prolific and brilliant writer who was much more well known as a blogger and let's say political commentator of the leftist underground. But I don't know exactly if you feel the same here in Russia, but in the quasi-democratic society of Ukraine, we have already, it's clear to us that in our situation you can write exactly anything. And you can like try to start any kind of discussion with your text, but this will lead to exactly nowhere. Because this kind of quasi-democratic society and the power that somehow learned to tolerate like different points of view is a society of the extreme powerlessness of the medium of the text, let's say. So I think that Volodarsky's intention was exactly this, and his intuition was exactly the same, that you don't start this discussion with a text, you need to transcend this medium into something else. And I think that in Russia it's probably the same, given the case of Pussy Riot. Because none of the texts that were criticizing the church in Russia led to anything like the discussion in society that started this year.
I have a comment related to the last comment by Katya and the last bit of a discussion about whether artists have to, artists have to follow a strict agenda in order to be, if there's some leftist agenda, that the artist's role needs to follow that agenda, that goal, and that intention. Otherwise, it's not helpful somehow. And then your response about, that also echoed what you said in your talk about spectatorship and Rancière's critique of spectatorship, and your proposal about participation. Proposing that artists who engage in participation as opposed to perform for spectators are more useful or relevant to leftist agenda now here. And my question is, it seems all very ironic since we're talking, one of the big examples is a critique of the church, of the Orthodox Church. Do artists have to subscribe to orthodoxies? I understand that maybe, Trotskyites have to, but I don't know if necessarily, I think one of the interesting things about being an artist is creating for oneself a certain kind of freedom of interpretation of any agenda and a freedom of response to situations. So one can sense various levels of what's going on in a situation other than just one tone of one kind of politics. There are several layers of politics happening even here right now, and one might sense these various levels of politics and think and intuit and engage and practice how to respond, which might include techniques of spectatorship, performativity, might include techniques of participation, might pull from different times, might cross the boundaries between science, for example, and art, or might cross the boundaries between past and present. But I think that's something that, I hope that that's something that's kind of room to move and to respond situationally is something that artists can retain and still be somewhat helpful, or at least not hurtful.
Okay. No, I prohibit it with the power of Politburo. You know? I decree that it's not possible. No artistic freedom. So my organization made that decree. It's just
The assembly.
yes, the assembly made the decree: no art, no creativity, only organization. It's just that I think that.
But Bifo yesterday said he called for poetry. Don't you remember?
Oh, yeah. We can't say against Bifo. Okay, it's impossible. So Bifo was right. But the idea is that I think if you talk about orthodoxies, right? What Vojna is doing is strictly following the orthodoxy, which was laid out in the 60s by this actionism, and they're repeating it in this very narrow field. I don't think that there is some kind of strategic analysis of the situation which forces them to make such and such things. I think. Yes, but I think that in this discussion, so I didn't want to prohibit, like I said, all the artistic expression. It wasn't about that. It was specifically about the media-driven action which leaves people as spectators and which is dogmatically repeated. So I think that you're completely right that an artist should make a strategic evaluation of what is happening and then decide what would be the most appropriate form. So, but still, we also have to take into account that our own illusions about these actions might be illusions, you know, that we might awaken consciousness and all that. That might be an illusion and not an actual fact. If we do an analysis, we should take these into account. So.
But I would like to say that sometimes extreme focus only on organization might lead to bureaucratization of the movement. On the one hand, on the other hand, there is always something that inspires the movement. And this something that inspires the movement is not reduced to the organizational legislation or whatever. So I think that there is always some part of ideology within the movement, and ideology comprises ideas, inspirations, artistic maneuvers, many elements.
Yes, but can we fabricate it? Can we produce inspiration? That's a difficult question. Isn't inspiration just part of our political experience, not being produced specifically by artists? It's just what we get as a byproduct.
Inspiration is produced by people and their strivings. I mean, there are not some artists which are standing. We are artists. We produce inspiration. No, it's not controlled like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I think we're close to the end of our
discussion.